Hey everyone, welcome back to the layout once again. Elephant in the room, I have been gone for a number of months now. However, rather than dwell on that and try to explain myself, I think we'll just pretend like that never happened. Really, I just got busy transitioning between things. I just graduated college, things like that. So anyway, we don't really need to talk about that. There are a few things though that I have worked on in my absence from YouTube. First thing you'll see over here is I've done a little bit more grass. This is the scene on the upper level up here in Crawford. So I just sort of went with a patchy kind of dry look over here. We got some weed strips in the middle. The other side I decided to add also some grass along the backdrop. This is a little lighter colored because what I want to do is add some trees like you see here. I'm going to put either trees about this size or some bushes along the back edge of the backdrop to sort of blend the scene into the sky. And that'll also sort of explain the dry grass out here too, because less light's going to get to it. Whereas the grass out here, I'm feeling like it's just more, just sort of open and unburdened by tree cover. I might even do a little fence along here as well. So this is looking good with the grass. I like the static grass. I'm using sill floor fibers and then also some 2mm Woodland Scenics fibers that I mix in to give it some texture. Now something else that you'll see if we turn 180 degrees here and look at the rest of the scene is that I have done most of the ballast over along this wall. You saw there was some ballast right over here where we were just pointing out the grass. And then over here on the main line I have this ballasted with Woodland Scenics fine gray blend. And then for the what's this, interchange track, helper pocket, and then the grain spur on the other side, which you can't see right now, that I made a lighter blend of ballast. Once again using Woodland Scenics products. I have a light gray, also some buff ballast, and then I'm also using some Arizona Rock and Mineral Company N scale ballast, which is really fine, almost powder-like, and I mix that in a few places to get some coloration, some like pink granite here and there, some darker grays, and I also sifted some dirt on top of the rails in a few places just to make these tracks look beat up and poorly maintained. Now I'd like to add too, before we move on, that I'm not done with the scenery over here in Crawford. One thing that we don't see yet on these tracks is some grass. On the prototype there's some grass that goes in between the rails and also in between and next to the tracks themselves, on the ties, in between the ties, things like that. So it's not a ton, but there's some tufts here and there, and I'd like to fill that in. And then the other thing that I really need to get working on is the grain elevator you see right here. This is not the final form or even close to it. I actually need to build some more silos and completely repaint it as well. As far as scenic progress is concerned, that's about the extent of it. The only other thing I've really done is added some grass along this little ridge here. You'll see I still need to do the ballast here. And then I also need to add a lot more trees. So even though western Nebraska is fairly arid, just sort of like grasslands, there's not a lot of forest, right in and around Crawford there actually are quite a bit of trees. So I'd like to add a bit more up here, probably not too much up here, a few bushes here and there. And then there's actually, if we can look all the way down here, if you can see that, yeah, there's going to be sort of a big clump of trees on the inside of this curve, and where this truck is, I'm going to have this access road kind of peel off this way where the grass ends. I'll have some weeds and bushes starting probably right in here and then kind of transitioning into some bigger trees towards the edge of the layout. Now for rolling stock there really is not a ton to share, which I guess that's a theme. I don't think I need to say anymore that there's not a lot to show because that's not different than any other time. So I will stop qualifying these updates because they don't really need to be. Anyway, I have a couple of Bachmann cars here. They are very poorly detailed from the factory. However, I'm thinking about doing some modifications, and in fact I already have a little bit. On this Alberta hopper here, you'll see that I've actually replaced the trucks with the proper 100-ton trucks. I've also changed the wheel sets from 33 to 36-inch wheels, and then I'm going to completely re-weather this as well. So this is not close to done. I'd like to peel off the end cages and replace that with some thinner styrene and then some metal grab irons to sort of spruce up the detail on the ends of the car. I've already replaced the trucks, as I said, and then some of these have some pretty cool weathering patterns to them with some gray patches here and there, and I'd like to patch the lettering as well. So that'll actually make this car sort of worthwhile to have on the layout. And then the same Bachmann car next to it in the Santa Fe scheme, you can see I've already started to do a pretty extreme fade on that. I still need to do some patching. I'm taking some prototype reference from a couple photos, nothing specific, but I'd like to have some pretty heavy rust on that, which you see I've started. And this one still needs to have the trucks replaced. And then, as I said, both of them need to have the end cages reworked as well. It reminds me too, since we're talking about those cylindrical hoppers, that when I get to completing the weathering or redoing the weathering, I do want to add some graffiti as well. I hand paint graffiti from time to time, but sometimes I like to just accelerate things. So I got a couple of sheets from Microscale of some really good looking car graffiti. So this will show up on a lot of my rolling stock, and will hopefully start to rework some of the stuff I have, sell some things, and purchase different rolling stock to finally have a really good mixed manifest. Because right now, honestly, I think it's a little too colorful. I've got reds and greens and weird cars you don't always see on BNSF Manifest. So I'm going to have to weather some of these, sell the ones I don't feel like fit, and then purchase new ones. So in the next few months, you'll start to see the consist I have here change once again, as it often does. And hopefully I'll settle on something that I really like. I'll keep the cars that are good, and then I'll stop selling off the ones that I really like, because that's been my problem in the past. I'll weather things, really good cars that I'd like to keep, but then I sell them for money, and I wind up with the cars that either don't really make sense for the prototype or I don't really like. So I'm going to focus on getting cars and keeping them, if that makes sense. And on the topic of car weathering still, here's a car that I did complete. This is a Walthers RD4 hopper. Used some prototype photos of this particular car number, and one of the things I really like is the coal dust that you see up along the upper edge of the coal hopper, and you can sort of see the profile of where the coal, when loaded, sits. And because BNSF sprays their coal loads with sort of this latex sealant, the powder tends to stick to the areas of the car where there isn't coal sitting. So I did that with acrylics. The rest of the car I airbrushed, added some acrylic washes here and there, and it turned out pretty good, I think. And this is what an unweathered car looks like, so you can see pretty significantly different. And I did try to highlight the ribbing on the car, or the braces as well, because those are generally a different color than the actual panels themselves. Now, I won't even dare to really show the weathering on these couple of boxcars I have here, because the lighting I have on the layout doesn't seem to really like my camera. So it's subtle anyway. So this boxcar I have here, this is a Walthers model. I just simply airbrushed the sill. I added some washes too. In person, it actually looks good. This is sort of a clean version of a similar car, except in CN paint. So you can actually kind of see how the roof is a little grimier over here. Really subtle, but it is in the new paint, so I wanted to keep it relatively clean. And then I have an Athearn Genesis version over here, which is slightly older. You can see, I don't know if you can notice this, but there's some really interesting, almost like fading effects on some of these panels. Turns out I nearly ruined this car because for whatever reason I did some oil washes on it at first, and I didn't like the way they looked, but things were kind of stuck on there, and I don't remember why I chose this over like Turpenoid or something, but I decided to put alcohol on the car, which is a very, very bad idea. I know you can use that to like scrape off lettering, but for whatever reason, that combined with whatever chemicals were in the wash, and I think I had put a clear coat on it as well, really screwed up the finish on the paint. So that's sort of the remnants of that. However, I salvaged it, and I actually think those effects turned out really well. So I'm going to say that wasn't a complete fail. I am going to keep the car. I originally thought, well, I'm just going to have to retire this or repaint it at some point, but I think it looks okay. And once again, you can see some of that grime on the top of the car that I did with oil washes. And one of the cool things I did as well is on the trucks down here, or not really the trucks, the wheel sets, I have a wheel mask, and rather than use an airbrush, I used some Rust-Oleum flat brown paint, and that made the wheel sets look really flat and oxidized and dirty, just like the real ones. Now, the only other thing I really feel like is worthwhile sharing is this tunnel portal over here. You can see I finally got that painted. So I only have one half of the tunnel finished, if you will, and that's this side. There's still another portal to do, but I think I showed you this in its incomplete state just with the plaster carving. But as you can see, I used some acrylic paints and just used a sponge to paint it all gray first, sort of a light gray, and then I came back with some washes to add the weathering effects. And if you look at prototype photos of this end of Belmont Tunnel, it's actually pretty close. It's not exact because I've had to compress some things, and I made a number of changes, but I wanted to capture the essence, and I think we've done that. The other thing I still need to do on this end, at least, is there, if you look at my blurry finger there, it's very tough to tell, but you can actually sort of see the tunnel liner sort of peeking out from the actual portal opening itself. So I need to blend the curved tunnel liner into the portal just using some plaster. I'll touch that up with some paint, and then we should be good to go on this side. And then I just need to do the same thing for the other side. Well, everyone, that's about it for this layout update. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that, and I'm just going to pan around here just as a refresher for everyone what the upper level on this side of the layout looks like. I don't have much to show on the lower portions yet, but I will get working on this area just below us here. I showed this in the last couple of layout updates. I'm working on sort of constructing Westminster Junction down here, so still a lot of sort of scenery substructure like the stuff you see up here. Still got to do that down below, and then I'll get to some ground cover. But things are definitely coming along up here on the upper level, which is what I'm focusing on right now. I hope to have quite a bit more scenery for you next time, and I promise you it will not take as long to get back to you as it did for this layout update. So I will not be gone for 2-3 months. I am leaving tomorrow, or I guess today, on a trip for about a week, but I'll be back after that, and I'll be back to working on the layout. So I apologize I was gone for so long, but I am back, I'm alive, and I thank you all for sticking around. And as always, thank you so much for watching, stay tuned, and I will see you next time.